Hello, my name is Laurentius Purba. I am a senior platform engineer at GitHub. I have my Twitter handle at LRPurba. I don't tweet that much except for in football season. That's when I ask a lot of questions about fantasy football. For those of you who don't know fantasy football is, that's okay. Hence the name, it's fantasy. Speaking of football, there will be a Super Bowl 56 this coming Sunday, February 13, 2022. This is Alexander Douglas Smith, call it Alex Smith. He was a quarterback at Washington football team. Recently, Washington football team changed their name to be a Washington Commanders. In November 2018, while playing against Houston Texans, he suffered a compound fracture to his right tibia and fibula. The incident was gruesome. He underwent 17 surgeries and sat out the entire 2019 season. While he was in recovery, he developed sepsis, which is a potential life-threatening complication from an infection. And he had to wear a brace to combat his drop food. But again, with help from his family, team members, coach, his team, and the team of doctors, and also his dedication and his hard work and willingness to play football again, he was able to play a football again. He was able to fight his fear of injury, fear of playing football again. And he gained confidence from his dedication and also his team members, his team, and his surrounding. I'll get back to you on this later on. As I mentioned, I work in GitHub. GitHub is a subscription-led and digital-focused media and marketing solutions company. We have hundreds of local media outlets in 46 US states, including USA Today. And we have 120 local media brands in the United Kingdom, News Quest. And we are also a digital marketing companies with such as Reach Local, Upcurve, and WordStream. We are the largest media-owned events business in the country, USA Today Network Venture. So what is the title of my talk or presentation here? It's upgrade your Vault using Failover. Sometimes you're afraid of upgrading Vault. I guess hopefully after we go over this presentation, there won't be no more afraid. This is what I've read. Well, I think it's still there when I started trying to get information on how to upgrade the Vault. There are important notes in red and a lot of information that the older version is not supported, no zero downtime upgrades in the yellow and in the important notes again. It's just, for me at a time, it's a little bit too much. So I personally need something that I can focus on. And it's something that gives me a confidence on how to upgrade our Vault. There are three things that we have to focus while upgrading the Vault. One is high availability, or HA. And the second one is failover. So these two combinations lead us to the Vault upgrade. So what is HA? HA allows the system to be up and running. So I'll give you an example. Let's say if we have a cluster of Vault with 3 Vault instances. If one instance is down, then the other 2 will take over. So there will be or we will have a minimal downtime. I'll go over later on in HA how the HA actually works. But there is a prerequisite in order to have a HA Vault cluster, which is the storage backend. The storage backend has to be HA supported. I provide the link to the storage backend that HA supported. The example is MySQL, Postgres, Consul, Google Cloud Storage, Spanner, and so on and so forth. So now let's go over to failover. Failover is making sure there's a standby or backup system. And this is actually a part of disaster recovery, which is disaster recovery is only available on enterprise Vault. There the example is, let's say I have 2 Vault clusters, one in the east and the other one in the west. And then we heard from the weather news that, let's say, next week there will be a hurricane or a heavy northeaster storm coming in to the East Coast. So we as an organization decided, hey, I think we need to failover from east to west. So by doing that, well, we make sure that our application up and running regardless the situation is. And that's the failover. So the combination of these two is how we upgrade our Vault. So good thing with Vault is it supports skip version upgrade. So we can jump from 103 to 127 without have to go one by one upgrading our Vault. But it also requires a procedure on how we are going to test the upgrade after the upgrade is performed. And the other important part is also about rolling back. In case there is something wrong, we should have a way to roll it back to a previous state. We will cover this thing in detail in the next slides. So how we gonna, as an organization, architect our Vault? This is the big picture that the architecture that we have currently. There's a lot of information here. I'm going to start from the bottom. As I mentioned before, the bottom is the storage backend. So in order to have your Vault high available, high HA, you need to have a storage backend that HA supported. And then the second one is going up to the next level is the Vault cluster active. So there is a thing here in the legend, active and passive. Active means that that's the Vault cluster that is receiving a request from the client or application or user. So here you can see we have 3 instances of Vault. One is the leader, the other one is follower, and the other 2 are follower. So any request coming into follower will be forwarded to the leader. This is the HA mode. If the leader is down, there will be an election between these 2 followers. They will select who is going to be a leader, and then one of them become the leader, and then the application still up and running. While the next one is, the yellow one, is a passive Vault cluster. But if passive cluster doesn't receive any request, doesn't do anything, right? And the next step is the domain, the DNS. So from here, we have the eastvault.com, and then the eastwest.com, sorry, the westvault.com. And then these branches off from the main vault.com. So when application, the client, or the app, so the user wants to access Vault, they are going to the main vault.com. And then from here, we redirect the request, go to the eastvault.com, and then go to the vaultactive.com Vault cluster active in the east, and then read or write from into this multi-regional bucket, which is a HA supported backend. So how we configure all of these, right? So we use Vault Helm. So in 2019, we find a bug, and then Jason or Donald was kind enough to let us know that he will be working on it and fix the issue. So now let's go in deep how the attributes configuration in values.yaml in this Helm chart is configured for the active and passive Vault clusters. So these are part of the values.yaml that we configure. If you can see, we have a Vault Helm enabled to true, and we set the replicas for HA to 3. So in the global image, we use the Vault 103. And besides that, there is other configurations such as seal, stanza. This is important, that allows us to have the automatic unseal. I'll get back to you later on for the automatic unseal, why this is important. And then we also configure audit storage, which is important for us to identify what's going on with Vault. So that previous configuration is for creating this active Vault with the 3 replicas and set that Vault enable to true. While for the passive one, we set the Vault Helm enable to false and replicas to 0. These will create the passive Vault. So these are the configuration that we set up in order to create active and passive Vault, or US East and US West clusters. So the common way to upgrade Vault is, let's take one of the 2 clusters that we configured. One is active, the other one is passive. Let's take the active one. The common way to upgrade the Vault is we upgrade one of the followers, or both of them, to 127. Once the followers are upgraded to version 127, then the leader, which is still 103, we shut it down. So by doing that, there will be election between these 2 followers. And one of them decided, hey, one of us should be a follower. Once one becomes a follower, then we can upgrade the remaining instances, in this case the leader, to 127. This is how the upgrade was performed. But for us, in the big picture of the Vault architecture, how we actually did that. This is the step-by-step procedure that we will see in the next few slides. So currently, all cluster which are US East and US West are on 103 version. So in values.yaml, we set the global image. Let's say we want to upgrade to 127, and then we set the enable true, and then replicas to 1. We can set it to 3. Here we set it to 1 is because it's easier to debug if there's something wrong. It doesn't matter, 1 or 3, it doesn't matter. So, and then we, as an organization, have our own tool that allows us to deploy our application to a certain cluster. So in this case, we want to deploy only for US West cluster. Then the in-house deployment application allows us to do that. So we deploy to US cluster. And now the US West is in 127. And US East is still 103. As you see that the active one is still in the US East. And the passive one, which is not receiving any requests, it's still in the US West. And also the main vault.com still pointing to the US East vault, which is going to the US East active vault cluster. So by having this, we can start testing the US West cluster that was upgraded to 127. We can access the westvault.com, and then it will redirect the request to the US West cluster, that just upgraded to 127. Do the whole test, make sure we have access to Vault, make sure the login token is still working, right? Once everything is okay, then we switch the active passive mode. In this case, we set the US West as active, and then we set US East as passive. So now our requests from client, from the apps, from the user go to the main vault.com, and then goes to the westvault.com that goes to the US West Vault cluster, which is currently active with the version 127. And we know that US East one still in 103 version. So continue on this one, we can do the same thing, upgrade the US East cluster to 127 version. By doing that, now we have these two clusters, East and West, are now in version 127. But the application, we didn't change it. It's still reading to and from US West cluster, which is currently active. But let's say we decided, hey, let's go back to what we had before, which is to the East. We can just switch it back. And then all the requests will be going to the East cluster, which is currently active. That's how the upgrade has been done in our organization. It's easier for us to identify if there's something wrong in the upgrade prior making it live, because we can test the newly upgraded Vault cluster in the US West, in the previous slide, before we switch it to US West and make it active. Next is the elephant in the room, which is the rollback. There are two things in the rollback. that we need to pay attention to. One is a backup storage backend, and the other one is downgrade Vault version. So prior upgrading our Vault, we have to create a backup of our storage backend. Since we are using a Google Cloud Storage, Google has a feature, which is a Google Data Transfer Service, that helps us to create a backup. It's fast, it's easy. Click a button and then boom, you have a backup ready. So let's start with our previous example that initially we have version 103. So we back up the storage backend 103, and then we upgrade it as we just saw in previous slides. And for some reason, everything is not working as expected. Now we have to roll it back. In order to roll it back, we have to bring this backup 103 to the existing a backup backend, which is basically overridden, right? And then we downgrade the Vault version from 127 to 103. So if you remember when we upgrade 127 on the west on the west, and that's when we have the ability to test it out if everything works as expected. Right? If it's not, then we can just roll it back. Will there be a downtime? And there will be a slight downtime. I don't think it can be avoided, but at least we have a confidence to roll it back. We have a confidence on how we upgrade the Vault. I'm going to show you a little bit a demo on how we upgrade the Vault from 103 to 127 in our sandbox environment. So here I have my terminal open on screen number 1. In this case, it's Wendy Ruderman on the west. We have that the Vault, if you see in the stateful sets, the version is 103. And then we set the replicas to 0. So which means that this cluster is passive cluster as per our Vault architecture diagram that we saw before. And on the number 2, that there's a watch for kubectl pods showing that there's no pods for the Vault. And for the number 3 is the way that we deploy the code, that we can do it from the UI or from the command line. In this case, I'm going to try from the command line. So now, let's say I set the replicas to 1. If I can go to the vault.yaml, right? So I can see the Vault 103, and then this false, and then I can see the replicas as of now is set to 3, right? But let me change, just do a quick edit on this one so we can see what's going on there. All right, it's up and running. If we set this one to 27, I'm going to change this one to 1 only. Excuse me. It's completed. now you can see the generate manifest file for this 1.0 domain cluster. So what we have to do is applying these changes. Check that as of now, the Helm 0 is still on 103. We apply these changes, so we can see this image is updated already. You see the PR apply the changes. You can see after the Vault version is updated and deploy the Helm chart. And then you can see the pod now is 127, which is in the West. It's still inactive, which is passive. And so this is the previous one, 10. Now it's already 127. After the upgrade, now you can see 127. It's a different menu. Before it was up here, now here. Now it's 127. So that's how we do an upgrade with the failover. So that's the demo that I just show it to you on how to upgrade Vault from 103 to 127. I started from the West cluster, which is in that case a passive cluster. And then also once the West cluster was upgraded, then we can access that from UI as I demonstrated before. The 103 UI is a little bit different than 127, and we can see the version 103 and 127. And then once we test it out, token, everything is working as expected on the West, then we can switch it, make it West to be an active cluster. Then application will be running through the West, which is active cluster. And then we can do an upgrade on the East. And if we want to switch it back from West to East, we can do so after the upgrade to 127 successfully. So as I mentioned, I'm going to go back to Alex Smith again. So finally, he was able to play football again. As a matter of fact, he became the 2020 Comeback Player of the Year because of that. The moral of the story is help from the team members and with dedication and willingness to put something into work and confidence level, practice. There's nothing to be fear of. That's pretty much it. Thank you for listening to my presentation. Thank you for HashiCorp for allowing me to do my first ever presentation. And then thank you for my cloud engineering team members. Thank you.